Hey, this is Sean from Time and Talk. Today's video, I want to make something a little bit different. I want to make a video about Gram Parsons, who is my favorite musician of all time. Absolutely love him. And he is kind of underappreciated in music and in the world in general. So Gram Parsons, basically he was a country musician, an alt country musician, very kind of influential, and he was born into quite a wealthy family, really. His dad was an airline pilot. His mum was an heiress to a massive fortune because her dad um, owned a lot of the citrus fruit producing farms, and he was really rich. He came from a rich family as a result of that. He did, though, have quite a difficult upbringing because his dad committed suicide, and both his parents were alcoholics. And then his mum remarried, and that marriage broke down as well. He also went to Harvard, Gram Parsons. A lot of people think that's because he was rich, and therefore, they let him in despite the fact that he wasn't qualified, if you like, to go to Harvard. And it was while he was at Harvard that he first got into country music in a big way and heard people like Mel Haggard and people like that for the first time. I think in terms of my experience and how I got into Gram Parsons, it was because of bands like Wilco and other alt country bands, and then gradually I became introduced to the work of Gram Parsons. I think through the Louvin Brothers, actually, which is another country group. Um, so yeah, but by this time we're in the mid 60s, and Gram Parsons, the first band that he was in, were called the International Submarine Band, and basically he got together with this band called the International Submarine Band, and they made one album. The album's called Safe at Home, and at this time, apparently he also appeared in a film, a Peter Fonda film, and with his band. And Peter Fonda actually recorded one of his songs called November Night. November Nights is the Gram Parsons song, and he recorded it, which is really weird. It's just a bit of a random thing, and I'm not sure whether that was kind of nepotism. But yeah, the International Submarine Band album is pretty good. It's not amongst the best work that he ever did, but it's quite a good album. And then I think basically after that, he he joined the Birds. It was really weird. Again, apparently I read Graham Parsons' not autobiography. Biography is really good. I think it's called Grievous Angel. Um, and it described the fact that the Birds were a massive group and they were rich because of the music that they made. But Graham Parsons, he wasn't a successful musician, but he was rich anyway because of his family. So basically, I don't know how he came to join the Birds, but I think the idea was that he must have convinced the other members to make a country album. And the album was called Sweetheart of the Rodeo. And basically, it's kind of a mixture of covers. I think mostly covers. So the Louvin Brothers are on there, and I think there's a Mel Haggard song. And it's really weird because like you associate the 1960s with like drugs and kind of left wing politics and things like that, and there the Birds are making a country album with songs like "The Christian Life," um, and I think Graham Parsons wrote a couple of songs for the album. I think Hickory Wind is one of them, and then basically after the album came out, they discovered that Graham Parsons was already contracted, I think because of the International Submarine Band, and therefore they basically erased a lot of his vocals on the album. Apart from, I think he still sings on the songs that he wrote himself, which is really weird. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what you guys think of um, Sweetheart of the Rodeo. It's not. I still wouldn't put it as one of my favorite things that Graham Parsons ever did. And I think in a way, it's weirdly more country than the other stuff that he did, despite the fact that the Birds were already famous. So they didn't need to make a country album. Um, then obviously Hillman, Chris Hillman, who was a member of the Byrds, followed Graham into the Flying Burrito Brothers. So the Flying Burrito Brothers was the next band that Gram Parsons was in. A bass player called Chris Etheridge and a pedal steel player called Sneaky Pete Kleino. The first album was called The Gilded Palace of Sin. It was a fantastic album, really, really influential. If you think about even music now, I'm listening to the most recently MJ Lenderman, who's very well. You would imagine he's influenced by Gram Parsons. The Gilded Palace of Sin is an absolute classic. It's a brilliant album. There's so many good songs on it. Dark End of the Street is probably my favorite Gram Parsons song. It's so the vocal performance is amazing, but originals as well, like Sin City and Hot Burrito 1 and Hot Burrito 2. They made another album with Gram. I haven't mentioned yet actually, which is a good thing. I think that Gram Parsons was a very into drugs, and I think they basically got sick of him, and ended up. I think he was fired from the Burrito Brothers after the second album, which wasn't a great album, to be honest. It's called Burrito Deluxe, and then that album also includes the very first recorded version of Wild Horses, the Rolling Stones song, because Keith Richards and Gram were very good friends, and he let him record it. Gram Parsons was such a hellraiser. Basically, he got thrown out of the chateau where they were making Exile on Main Street. He was even a tearaway compared to Keith Richards. And then what we come to is Gram Parsons' solo career. So it's his solo career. So obviously the early 70s we're into now. No longer with the Burrito Brothers. And he formulated a partnership with Emmylou Harris. I think basically he saw her performing and thought that she would be a good person to sing with, and in that in itself is a testament to his influence, because she's one of the most important people in the history of country music, and obviously later on she worked with Bob Dylan. She worked with Gram Parsons first, and he made two albums with Emmylou Harris. The first one's called GP, and the second one is called Grievous Angel. The second one was actually released after his death, and great albums. I think in terms of the first one I would say was more kind of country, traditional country, and the second one is kind of less traditional, if you like, and the songs are just so good, particularly the second album. And another thing, Elvis Presley's backing band is the band on the two albums, and kind of I think a lot of his reputation, Gram Parsons, rests on those two albums. The harmonies with him and Emmylou Harris, and the quality of the songs, particularly on the second album, even though I think on the second album he didn't write many songs. He kind of used kind of songs that he already had, but amazing songs. If you're gonna check out only one, it's a cover, but the version of Love Hurts on Grievous Angel, because that song has been done to death really, and it's the version on that album is so good, despite the fact that that song's been performed really badly by a lot of people. So the harmonies on that are amazing. $1,000 Wedding, Brass Buttons, songs like that, just fantastic and fabulous. At this time, apparently, during the recording of the second album, Gram was like taking things more seriously and getting off drugs a little bit, and not being the hellraiser that he used to be, and unfortunately that led to his demise really, because I think basically what happened was, well, when I was reading his biography, it basically said that he was kind of clean, but I think he was at Joshua Tree and took drugs, heroin and morphine, and I think basically overestimated his tolerance because he'd been clean for a bit, and then overdosed and unfortunately didn't make it through. And I was reading something else in researching for this video that didn't say that. That said he took way too much and he shouldn't have done that. But that's what I always thought happened. That he was clean and he was getting better, but he overestimated his tolerance. It's not, I think the 19th of September, 1973. I want to say. And he was 26, so a waste really. And I think in terms of his importance in music, it's much more than you would imagine, given the fact that he's not very well known, because he essentially created alternative country music. He called it cosmic American music. It was like a fusion, if you like, of rock and roll music and country. Maybe he didn't create it, but he definitely was massively influential in that era and in that creation of that type of music. And you can still hear his influence in so many people. His songs and his singing voice and his iconic look really is amazing. And after his death, there was another infamous story, which is basically that apparently his tour manager was called Phil Kaufman, and apparently Gram said that he wanted to be buried at Joshua Tree. So this guy actually stole his body from the airport and tried to take him to the Joshua Tree and burn his body. Amazingly, it wasn't apparently a crime to steal a dead body, so he didn't even get put in prison for it. But that was made into a film. It was called Gram Parsons. Johnny Knoxville was in the film, but that's another famous story. But I would really encourage you to, if you haven't already done so, to check out his music. I mean, I remember the very first time that I heard Gram Parsons, I bought GP. No, it wasn't. It was Grievous Angel. I bought Grievous Angel for a friend, and then they became like my favorite musician of all time. I'm obsessed with Gram Parsons, and he's a good place to kind of start exploring kind of American music and to start exploring country music a little bit, because I really like country music, but I can understand why people, when they hear country music, they think that's a bit naff, or that's not to my taste, because a lot of country music is kind of really saccharine and things like that. But I think it's a good place to start, Gram Parsons, and it leads you down, Buck Owens and Mel Haggard and Willie Nelson and all these people. But the back catalogue of Gram Parsons, for considering he died so young, 2 fantastic solo albums, an amazing album with the Flying Burrito Brothers, and other good stuff, and some great interviews and some covers of other songs as well, and obviously the connection with Emmylou Harris, which cements his reputation in country music and music more generally. A bit of a rambling video, and I didn't want to make too much about the kind of Gram Parsons, the Hellraiser, because I think his music just means so much to me that I wanted to share it a little bit. So anyway, I hope you liked the video. If you like the channel, please subscribe. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.